Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob. Welcome to the channel. And in case you're wondering, no, I do not rob banks. I just talk about them sometimes. Now, as we can see here, the Federal Reserve did actually cap dividends and share buybacks for some of the large banks such as Wells Fargo and JP Morgan, but that's not actually what we're talking about in today's video. Instead, I'll be covering last week's jobs report. I'll also be covering Trump's current status as well as the ongoing negotiations in Congress over the next relief package. But before we get into that, make sure you subscribe and be sure to hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Now, let's get into the news. All right, so the jobs report and unemployment. The U.S. economy added 661,000 jobs for the month of September, missing analyst expectations by almost 200,000. But despite this, the unemployment rate has dropped to 7.9%. Now, before you get excited about the drop in the unemployment rate, there is some additional context to this. The jobs added in September does not take into account the mass corporate layoffs in the coming weeks. Yes, these layoffs right here that I'm talking about. But we'll get to that later. So between American and United, more than 30,000 people will be let go from their positions as a result of the still low travel demand. And as you can see here, Disney will be terminating about 28,000 of their own employees. That's about 60,000 people that will be let go from their jobs at just those three companies. That's a lot, but those layoffs haven't happened yet, and there will be more hires in October, which means the unemployment rate will continue its trend downward, right? Well, yeah, I think it's likely that the unemployment rate will continue to decrease, but it's important to understand why. To keep all of you up to speed, the U3 unemployment rate, which is the rate released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics each month, tracks the number of people who do not have a job but are currently looking for one. It does not take into account those who are not actively looking for a job, regardless of how recently they had one. Unlike U6, it also doesn't include underemployed workers. So the problem is that many of these people are actually leaving the labor force, and with that, the unemployment rate decreases. And let's do a quick little example to illustrate this. So let's say you have a labor force of about 10 million people, and 1 million of those people don't have a job, but they're actively looking for one, leaving the remaining 9 million employed. All right, so let's put in 1,000. We're just going to take out 100 just to make it easier. So this 1,000 represents 1 million. And then you divide that by 10,000, you have an unemployment rate of 10%. Now let's say that half of those people who are unemployed, get discouraged and then stop looking for work. So then that would be 500,000 divided by 9.5 million. And then you can see that the unemployment rate decreases to about 5.3%. So the unemployment rate isn't really decreasing because more people are finding work. It's decreasing because less people are looking for work. And this can be for a variety of reasons, such as becoming discouraged by the hurdles that one has to face when trying to find a job during a pandemic, which I think might be the most common, as well as whatever personal or familial responsibilities may have come up for some people during this time. This Bloomberg article in particular gives us an idea of what some of those additional responsibilities might be. Now right here they say women between the ages of 25 and 54 are increasingly dropping out of the workforce, often to care for children. Nancy Weindruck, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a case in point. She left her job in communications in July to care for her 2-year-old son while her husband kept his higher paying work as a political consultant. Earlier in the pandemic, she took advantage of a government program that provided paid leave but has since expired. She hopes the situation is temporary. So yeah, that's an example. During this pandemic, a lot of women are finding themselves in the position where they have to stop working to care for their children. Because let's remember this, a lot of schools are staying online this fall. So there are many women that now have to provide additional supervision to their children because their kids are not physically in school. Now, I'm not going to get into like the whole gender wage gap topic right now because that's a very complicated topic, and honestly, that would deserve its own video. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see that. But I'm just using this to illustrate that point of a lot of people have stopped looking for work, women in particular, according to this article. And here is something that was big news last week: the reopening of New York City public schools. Now, I bring up this article in particular not because of politics or anything, but because apparently the New York City school system is suffering from staffing shortages. Like, they don't have enough teachers. Now, let's see where this is. Oh, here it is. The United Federation of Teachers, the city's most powerful teachers union, soon began raising alarms about the need for safety measures. Now, that seems totally reasonable to me. Now, the unions representing both teachers and principals delivered an urgent warning. If the mayor reopens schools as scheduled, children will report to classrooms without teachers, and here's the kicker, because of a huge staffing shortage. Now, I don't know why this is. I honestly have no idea why the New York City school system is facing a staffing shortage. It's just my guess that it's because some of these people are leaving the labor force. Think about it. Some of these teachers are in a higher age group. Some of them are like in their 50s and 60s and whatnot, and who wants to go back to school in person and teach if they're at risk for serious complications from the virus? If I were in that position, I probably wouldn't want to either, to be honest. So some of these teachers that are like in their 60s, they're probably just retiring, honestly. They don't want to take the risk. There's likely at least a very small percentage of teachers in lower age groups that are also quitting. Yes, even though they don't get to retire. Now, I'd also like to point out 76% of public school teachers in the United States are female. So what that Bloomberg article was saying, at least to some degree, seems to make sense. And the reason why I say that is, and of course this is a very specific example, but if there are teachers, well, there surely are, even if it's a small percentage, there are definitely teachers who have stopped working. Sure, it's likely ones that have just retired. It could be. We don't know. But there is a percentage of teachers who have stopped working because of the pandemic. And there's a good chance that a high percentage of those teachers are women, simply because the share of public school teachers in the U.S. is much higher than the share for men who are public school teachers. Now, why is this a problem? Well, looking at this article in the Journal, the slowdown in job gains, if it persists, is worrisome because the longer people are out of work, the more their skills typically erode and the harder it can be for a lot of them to find jobs once the recovery takes hold. In another unsettling sign, the number of unemployed who say their loss of employment is permanent, meaning they have no job to go back to, rose again in September to 3.8 million from 3.4 million in August. But in February, that figure was 1.3 million. So that right there is a huge increase in discouraged workers. By the way, that's like the textbook definition of discouraged worker right there. Now, the next paragraph says it is, of course, possible that September was a fluke and that job gains will rev back up again this month. But there's been a worrisome pickup in companies announcing significant layoffs, like I previously mentioned, Walt Disney and Allstate, which I did not mention earlier this week. Many small businesses are financially strapped. And I bring you to this article. 60% of Yelp businesses that closed during the pandemic are gone. Closed permanently, according to a report released by Yelp. Now, there are probably a couple of you thinking like, oh, well, that's biased because it was conducted by Yelp. Why would Yelp lie about businesses closing? I mean, maybe they underestimated it. I don't know. But in a case like this, I don't think they did that. And it says right here, more than 160,000 businesses listed on Yelp have indicated that they closed since the onset of the pandemic in early March through August 31st. But 60% of those are permanently closed. That's like almost 100,000 businesses that are not coming back. Now, yes, of course, I get it. Like, people like to say, like, oh, there will be new businesses in the future once the vaccine comes out and life goes back to normal. But these are people's livelihoods that we're talking about here. These are families who own some of these businesses. And all that work that they put in is now just gone. It's a real shame. And look, sure, it's true that there's going to be new businesses. But let's even ignore the fact that these are people's livelihoods that have essentially been ruined. It still takes a while to build these businesses. Some of these businesses, or actually a lot of these businesses, have to run on losses for like the first couple years. There's a lot of hard work that goes into running these small businesses. Well, any business in general, but still, it takes time to get these businesses started. So as a quick recap, the unemployment rate is decreasing, but it's not decreasing for the reasons that most people would think. It's not because more people are finding jobs. A lot of people are leaving the labor force. Now, let's also be clear here. 661,000 new jobs in a month at any other period in time would be great, but this is not a normal time. And I think it even says right here in this article, right here. These are normal times, though. If anything, the September employment figures counted as bad. But anyway, on to the next topic. Very early Friday morning last week, it was announced that Donald Trump and Melania had tested positive for the virus, sending the markets into a bit of a frenzy. The Dow slipped 0.5%, while the S&P 500 dropped by about 1%. Now, this isn't too bad, but we want stocks to go up, right? Well, at least one of them did, because after it was announced that Trump was given a pharmaceutical cocktail from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, their stock went up by about 3% in after-hours trading on Friday. Now, Trump is also being treated with remdesivir, manufactured by Gilead Sciences, though I think that stock only went up by about 13 cents in after-hours trading on Friday. Now, as for Trump's condition, it seems like he's okay. We can't really be too sure since the White House has been sending mixed signals on his condition, though it's been recently announced that Trump is supposed to be out of Walter Reed like today. Oh, he even made a tweet. I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. Feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed under my administration some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. I don't know why, but that last sentence is just very amusing for some reason. I don't know. It's just really funny. Like, wait a minute. Stock market up big, 466 points. Great news for America? Hold on, let me look this up. Was the market really up by 466 points? Hold on a second. Dow surges 466 points with Trump set to leave the hospital. Wow, this is crazy. The stock market is really something else. Honestly, I don't understand why people are so happy about, well, I shouldn't say people, I should say investors. I don't know why they're so happy about Trump getting out of the hospital today, because here's the thing. The virus has about a 5 to 6 day incubation period. So that means around October 7th to 8th is when, if he starts to get symptoms, that is when it will happen. So for him to be out of the hospital before the 7th to the 8th is just not a good idea. He really should not be doing this. I don't understand why they're letting him do this. Hopefully they get some medical staff from Walter Reed to monitor him while he's in the Oval Office, because otherwise that's just not a good idea. Taking unnecessary risk. Now, some sites are reporting that apparently Trump had another test for the virus on around Wednesday, and that one did come back positive, and then he had a second one which was the one that was announced on Friday. So basically, he's been positive for a minute. Now, one would think that with Trump's test results, as well as the upcoming mass layoffs, would put some pressure on Congress to agree on some type of deal. But unfortunately, they are now in recess. However, according to Bloomberg, lawmakers are on call to return if there is a deal to vote on. Now, I should also mention that the Senate is also on recess, since I think it was about 3 senators tested positive for the virus last week, though they can reconvene on 24 hours notice if there is a bill to vote on. So what's the holdup? Well, other than the fact that Congress is in recess, last week the House Democrats did pass a $2.2 trillion bill. However, they have not yet come to an agreement with Republicans in the Senate as well as the White House. They are still in disagreement on how much of a boost to provide and where it should be directed. Now, some of this disagreement is over how much funding should be provided to schools as well as the state governments. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin did continue their talks on a relief package today, but the House bill proposes $600 a week in benefits through the end of January, along with $436 billion in aid to states and local governments. By contrast, Steve Mnuchin offered $400 weekly and $250 billion in state and local government support. And another thing here is that Mnuchin is advocating for liability protections for businesses, and the Democrats, they're not really feeling that. But I suppose we could say that Pelosi is, at the very least, feeling some of the pressure, because she is asking the airlines to delay those upcoming layoffs. You know, the 30-some-odd thousand that I mentioned earlier. She also said that she'd be willing to support a standalone bill that would provide financial support to the airlines. Now, I mentioned this because it was previously reported that she was against a standalone bill because it would make it more difficult to pass a larger relief package. But hey, you know what they say, nothing gets a politician moving like 30,000 layoffs. Though I will say that I kind of feel like that's a valid concern. But yeah, that's really about it for this video. There's certainly going to be a lot more coming up this week. So to sum it up, Congress has not reached a deal yet, but it looks like they're getting somewhere. And I'm not saying that they're going to come to an agreement this week, but who knows? There's going to be a lot occurring in the week ahead of us. anything can happen. Well, that does it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Also, be sure to leave any questions or feedback or any interesting articles that you found in the comments section below. Once again, my name is Rob, and I will see you all later.